In a previous video of mine, I went through my camera settings, and in that video I mentioned that I'd go through how I work with D-Log-M footage in two situations. So working on the computer, so if you're just editing on desktop, and then also if you're actually using your mobile phone to edit your footage. And I'm also going to share a little trick with you so that you can see what the D-Log-M footage actually looks like whilst you're filming, because obviously the footage is flat. So in the other video where I talked about my camera settings, I also mentioned that shooting in D-Log-M gives the best image quality overall, especially as the normal colour profile in the Action 5 Pro looks over-processed. But shooting in D-Log-M for some people seems overwhelming because they think that they need to spend ages colour grading the footage. But that's not necessarily the case, especially if you're a complete beginner and you just want to get the best quality footage out of the Osmo Action 5 Pro. But before I got into the process of converting the footage and then adding some adjustments to further enhance the look of the footage, I just want to say that this video is sponsored by FlexiSpot because they recently sent me one of their ergonomic office chairs, the FlexiSpot C7. So I've had this for about 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, but it is definitely a lot more comfortable than the chair that I was using before, which I had for like 10 years. And I sit and I edit for long periods of time, for hours throughout the day. But I think the comfort for me with the C7 is how I can adjust it to my specific seating position. So I now have a lumbar support that I can adjust the height of, and the seat depth is actually another thing that you can adjust as well. Something that I didn't like about my other chair was the fact that, so I'm 5'3", and so when I sat on that other chair, if I tried to sit all the way back, then my feet would be off the floor because the depth of the chair was too much. Whereas with this one, I can basically adjust that so I have a much more comfortable seating position. There's also an adjustable headrest as well, but given that I'm short, I can't really make much use of this because the adjustability of it only really accommodates people who are between the height of 5.7 and 6.9. But yeah, so far it feels really comfortable. The material is actually really nice as well, so it's a mesh material and it does come in another material also. So if you want to try it out for yourselves, then FlexiSpot has a risk-free 30-day return policy, so if it's just not the right fit for you, then you can return it within that 30-day period. But I've dropped a link in the description so that you can find out a little bit more about it and have a look at some more of the details. And if you do want to go ahead and buy it, then you can use the code and that will give you some money off the C7 chair. Okay, so I mentioned earlier how there's a little trick that you can do when you're filming in D-Log-M so that you can see what the footage looks like when you'll eventually convert it when you're editing the footage. So in the Osmo Action 5 Pro camera settings, when you put the color profile into D-Log-M, you'll see this option called color recovery. By default, it's off, but when you turn it on, the footage looks normal. So it's gone back to it shows you what the normal color space would be. So if you're worried that the footage is going to look rubbish, then you can turn that on and see what the end result is likely to look like. And then you can just adjust the exposure if you need to, if you think that the footage is looking a little bit too dark or a little bit too bright. It's also worth saying that when you do use this color recovery mode, it's not gonna bake that final look into the footage. It's just to give you a preview of what that footage is actually gonna look like. So when you do record the footage, it's still gonna record in that flat color profile. It's just so that you can see at the time of filming what the footage might look like. So if you edit your footage on your mobile phone, then you can use the DJI Mimo app to actually convert the footage from D-Log-M to a normal color space. Okay, so it's really easy. All you have to do is go into your album of clips and then choose any clip that you want that was shot in D-Log-M. I'll grab this one. And then you'll see here that you've got this color recovery icon. When you click on that, it's literally going to convert it for you. It's that easy. So this is D-Log-M before the conversion and then D-Log-M after the color conversion. And then you can just go ahead and export the clip, choose your different settings, and then you're good to go. So if you edit on your computer, you can pretty much use any editing software that allows you to actually import those LUTs. So editors like Final Cut Pro, like I use, Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve, CapCut, Filmora, they will all allow you to import LUTs and work with those with your footage. And using LUTs is actually going to be the quickest and the easiest way to convert your footage, especially if you are a beginner. You can also do it manually for each clip, which gives you more control, but it does take a little bit more time. So when using LUTs, there is a free way of doing this. All you need to do is go to the DJI website and then you can download the free Osmo Action 5 conversion LUT for D-Log-M. So once you've done that, you just need to import that LUT into your editing program. And if you're not quite sure how to do that, then there's loads of tutorials on YouTube which will show you, based on whichever editing program you're using, how to import those LUTs. When you add your footage to the timeline, there are two ways that you can actually apply the LUT to the footage. So you can take the LUT and apply it to individual clips on the timeline, or you can add an adjustment layer. This might be called something else depending on the editing software that you're using. But you can apply a layer over the top of all your clips and then apply the LUT directly to that layer so that it affects all the clips in the sequence. Depending on the clips and the scenes that you have as well, which is why you might want to apply the LUT to individual clips instead, you might want to just dial down the intensity of that conversion LUT, because it might look a little bit too strong. You don't have to do this, this comes down to your personal preference at this point. It's subjective, so you'll have a look at the footage and you see whether you like the look of it or you just want to tweak it a little bit. But there are some other adjustments that you can do if you want to take things a little bit further and just make the footage look a little bit better. So if you feel like you didn't expose the footage quite correctly whilst you were out filming, then you can adjust this. And in Final Cut Pro, I tend to use the brightness slider and the color wheels. And then I just tweak it until it looks a little bit more accurate. And I'll use my scopes so that I can make sure that my highlights aren't going above this 100 line, and also make sure that my shadows aren't going below the 0 line. But I like to keep everything close to the middle, especially if I'm looking at my skin tone. I want my skin tone to be around the 50 to 60% mark. And also, depending on the scene and what I filmed, I sometimes make a bit of an adjustment to things like the foliage, like trees and bushes, and then also the sky, just to enhance the colours a little bit. So depending on how the trees and the bushes look, I will make that green a little bit more of a bluey green rather than a yellowy green. And for that, I use my hue saturation curves. All I have to do is select the color picker, and then in the scene, I'll click on a leaf or the sky, and then it will isolate those colors for me, and then I can just move those around until I get the look that I'm looking for. And then I also play around with the hue saturation and luma, so that makes the colours darker or lighter, and I just play around with that until I get the final look that I'm after. And then that is pretty much it. So if you want to see what camera settings I use to actually get to this point with the Osmo Action 5 Pro, then I recommend checking out this video next.